Hey everybody, Nate Jomaa with the Nate Jomaa Mortgage team at U Mortgage, and I am here with my guest Matt Hulberg with Jett Title, and we are going to be talking today about why do you need title insurance? Matt, thanks for coming on.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, my friend. All right, so title insurance. What exactly is title insurance?
So first of all, I just want you to know I'm going to all of my explanations on all of this will be easy to understand for everybody.
Good.
This is title insurance is a rabbit hole that you can go down, and you can keep going down and stuff. So we're going to keep it on a basic level here. I'll tell you why you need it. I'll tell you what it is. So we need to start with what is title. So in what I do and those type of things. So title, of course, in real estate, title in real estate is your ownership right to a property. So and when you do a title search, we're looking for things. First of all, title search is a standard process in the home buying process, and it's meant to uncover issues that could prevent your right to that property. So, or cause you legal issues down the road. We're also looking for right to sell from the sellers because, as we all know, fraud is huge right now. So, what is title insurance? There's two types of title insurance. We have our lender's title insurance and we have owner's title insurance, and they cover exactly who's in the names of those. So why is there two types? Well, lender's title insurance usually required by the lender to protect the lender's financial interest in the property. And the owner's title insurance policy, let me go back a minute. That lender's title policy, Nate, they're only protecting their financial interests in that property, not the home buyer or the borrower. So owner's title insurance is insurance that protects the owner, protects their rights to the property for as long as they live. It also protects their heirs for as long as they own that home. So that's what title insurance is.
Gotcha. So if I buy title insurance, that means that I'm protected against anything that comes my way, guaranteed.
Well, yes. So you're covered as long as you own that home, and we're talking about coverage from things in the past that could come up or be uncovered in the future, or things that could jeopardize your ownership or right to that property. Yes.
What kind of things are you talking about that could jeopardize my ownership?
I'm glad that you brought that up because there is, despite us doing our title search and despite us being as good as we are at this, there's always things that can pop up. So I'll give you a couple examples real quick. Do we have time? Can I give an example?
Yeah, please.
So some things that could pop up. Let's say the previous owner had his or her roof replaced on the property, and they did not pay the roofer before they sold the property. Well, the roofer has a legal right or to claim against that property, and that could come back on you as a mechanic's lien on the property as a new homeowner. So that's protection for that. I'm going to give you a quick example of something that happened. So I was at a closing table. I had a buyer, I had a seller, and at the table we have our sellers sign a seller's affidavit. So it basically says there's no liens or encumbrances on this property other than what we've already outlined. Maybe a normal payoff or a second mortgage, something like that. And the seller said, nope, we don't have anything. We closed on the deal. 2 days later, Nate, the realtor called me up and said, Matt, I think we have a problem. There's a lien on this property. Well, ooh. Yeah. So I sent an abstractor out to do a search on the property, and sure enough, there was. And the way that title companies work is they will do their title search, and they will date and timestamp that title search, and it's usually within a certain window to closing. And we were within that window of closing, and we would have done it a couple days later just to make sure the payoffs had been released. We would have identified it then. But the neighbor came up to the realtor is how this came about. So we did our search, date, time stamped. Let's just say, I can't remember exactly, but let's say it's at 9 o'clock in the morning. Well, that afternoon at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the neighbor brought a judgment lien and recorded it on the seller's house. The neighbor had that judgment lien for 1 year. It was awarded 1 year prior to that. So just because a lien is not filed does not mean that it's not valid. And so what had happened was, and I'll give you the scenario. So there was a tree that sat like directly in the middle of the property line. So the seller and the neighbor decided they were going to share the expense, and it was like $2,200 or something like that. And the neighbor went ahead and paid for it, and the seller was going to give the neighbor money and never did. The sale sign goes up, the neighbor gets nervous, so on and so forth. Finally, the sold sign goes up, and the neighbor runs down and files that judgment lien on the property. So what happened was the buyer had owner's title insurance. And before that week was over, the title insurance company took care of that lien, got rid of that lien, and then of course went after the seller. So it's a perfect example of something that pops up later on.
So how does that work if I have something that I haven't filed yet and then some time passes? Am I protected with my title insurance policy against those sort of things?
Yes, you absolutely are. You're protected. You're protected on the commitment and the search that we've provided, assuming that we haven't made any mistakes as a title company. You're absolutely 100% protected.
So your protection goes in place at that point in time based on anything that was previously filed. So if anything gets filed after that, how does that work?
Well, so it's all depending. So if it's on the seller and it's a predetermined judgment, then of course it would be taken care of on that. Now, if it's on the seller and the property is sold and they try to put a lien on it, well, then that's a legal matter for attorneys to get involved in. But title insurance is going to protect your interest.
Gotcha. So when you're doing a title search and issuing a title commitment for the lender or for the buyer, can you just give us a quick explanation of how that search is done? And do you have attorneys that are involved to make sure that those things are, as they say, legally airtight?
So let's start with the process. So we will do a title search on the property that goes back in on a purchase. On a purchase mortgage, we'll go back 30 years, and we will search to make sure that the chain of title is intact. The chain of title means it's moving from one person to the next person. And during those moves, any liens or encumbrances that seller had were taken care of or paid off in that transaction. Sometimes they get missed, or they're not recorded as paid off, and we will take care of that before we get to closing. We'll run down all the paperwork. Most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, it's just a recording error at the clerk's office. But we'll go back 30 years. We'll make sure that the chain of title is intact. We'll make sure the transfers have gone. We'll make sure all the liens are paid. And then what we're doing with the current seller is a couple things. First of all, we're making sure that seller has the right to sell. So if it's just you, Nate, on the deed, the current deed as a single person, I only need you to sell.
Right.
If it's you and your spouse, well, I need you and your spouse to sell now. Now, if you own a company, well, now we've opened the book up, and I may need multiple people to say that it's okay to sell this property. And so that's what I'm looking for. I want to make sure that you legally own this property, and how we are going to transfer it over, whether it's single or married or tenants in common, whatever it may be, that we transfer it properly. I'm also looking to make sure that there's the liens or encumbrances that are on the property are ones that we could take care of at closing. For example, a lot of people have a mortgage on their home, and let's say you're selling your house, Nate, and you've got a mortgage with U Mortgage, but you're buying another house. I need to make sure that your house transfers clean without your mortgage, without that lien from U Mortgage on your house, to whoever your buyer is. So at the closing table, my job is to have a payoff for you, mortgage for you, and send that money in, so that when we record the new mortgage for your customer that you did the loan for, they get that house free and clear of any other previous liens or encumbrances.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So who is checking that to make sure that I'm protected when those things come about? Help me understand, I guess. I mean, not that I don't trust Jett Title, obviously, but my question is, if in fact you might have overlooked something, how am I covered, or how does that work?
Okay, yeah, so that's a great question, because title insurance, of course, covers anything that was in the past. You're talking about, what if I make a mistake? So in that particular case, and we all talk about insurance, so errors and emissions insurance covers me on that. But I've got a great team that just like many title companies have, got a great team that doesn't just look at the title search once, but we look at it twice. And we also have our title insurance underwriters that will give their eyes on it as well. It seems like a title search would be difficult to read, but it's in chronological order, and it's very easy to identify. I shouldn't say that it's very easy, because in some cases, as you know, it can I've just jinxed myself for the next 20 deals, so they're all going to be crazy. But in a lot of cases, I hope not. I'm knocking on wood, by the way.
Thank you.
But in a lot of cases, we've got multiple eyes that review that title search, so that we could, when we put it into commitment form, we're good to go. And so we've got our errors and emissions insurance, and in a lot of cases, our title insurance underwriters will give us a title commitment as well. Chicago Title, is one of the big ones. WFG, Westcor, those places work with us.
Awesome. Very cool. So do you have any other examples of times when title insurance saved somebody, or they potentially opted out of title insurance and they wish that they hadn't?
Yeah, so I do. I've got one. I'll try to make it quick. This is a pretty extreme case of what could happen. So there was this and I'm going to talk about another state, but so in this other state, there was hundreds and hundreds of acres of land, and it was in a, not quite a suburb, but it was out of town a little ways of probably a mile or two, and it was going to become. Today it is part of the town. So anyways, on this road, and the road runs east and west. And so Farmer Johnson, for sake of what his real name is, and I don't know. So Farmer Johnson owned all the land on the north and south side of this east-west road. Well, Farmer Johnson passed away, and let's say he passed away, I don't know, 60, 70 years ago. And Farmer Johnson passed away. He did not have a will. So the courts stepped in, and it was their responsibility, their job, to identify all of Farmer Johnson's heirs to that property, so they could decide what to do with it. And the courts did the best job they could. They got everybody together. They put them in a conference room, similar to a closing room is how I picture it. They got everybody around the conference table, and the heirs decided they were going to break up and sell all of Farmer Johnson's land. And they did that. They did that to investors. And today there's billions of dollars of real estate on the north and south side of that east-west road. And when I say billions of dollars of real estate, I'm talking about residential. There's some commercial with churches and like a little general store, stuff like that, on both the north and south side, and a lot of subdivisions in there. Well, when they sold to those investors put a type of title insurance to protect themselves and their buyers if anything were to happen. Mm-hmm. So that, 60, 70 years ago, fast forward to 20 years ago, so total time frame about 50 years, and a young lady, not so young anymore, comes forward with her hand raised and said, hey, Farmer Johnson was Grandpa Johnson back in the day. I should have been at the round table. And sure enough, the title insurance people, everybody did their due diligence, and she should have been around the table, Nate. And they left her out of the decision making, but she had a legal right to all of the land on the north side and the south side of that east-west road. And and I'm going to just talk worst case scenario here. So worst case scenario, had that title insurance not stepped in and paid her and made her go away, worst case scenario, you get an eviction notice on your door of the house you own in one of those subdivisions saying, sorry, this title was transferred improperly. You do not own this property. So what does that do to you as a homeowner in that scenario if you didn't have owner's title insurance? Ultimately, it could mean you pack your bags and you have to move.
No.
Yes. And it also means that the equity you had in that property doesn't belong to you anymore because it was never your property to begin with. It could be a devastating loss. It could be a devastating loss. So luckily in that particular case, and this is a true story, by the way, luckily in that particular case, title insurance stepped in and that error went away. And most of the people that live on the north and south side of that east-west road have no clue that even happened. They're very, very lucky.
Yeah, I would say
yeah,
that could have been very, very problematic, right?
That is an extreme case, though. So it's typically what happens is things like, what I told you before, with the shared tree expense. Sometimes a husband and wife own a property together. They've gotten divorced, but they both have legal right to the property, and one spouse sells without the other's knowledge. That's a pretty common thing to happen.
Right.
And most commonly, we have a lot of times where we'll have a mechanic's lien on the property that wasn't filed when it was listed or searched. So, anything that those types of scenarios. I've got a pretty big scenario that, and I've never had it recorded before because there might be some discrepancies in the actual facts, but it really drives home the importance of title insurance, and it goes way back, pre 1900s.
Okay. So before you tell that story, just two quick questions.
Yeah.
The first question is, I mentioned it earlier, but is it possible for somebody to opt out of having an owner's title policy?
It is. It's not a requirement.
Okay, great. And then the second question, you've said a few times, mechanic's lien. Is that just a standard type of lien for a roofer or somebody that's doing work on a property, that they make sure that they put the lien down so that they are getting paid? Like, why would somebody issue or file a mechanic's lien?
Yeah, exactly what you said. So if a roofer doesn't get paid, he puts a lien on your property so that if, the minute there's money on that property, he gets his money first or her money first.
Gotcha. So when I buy my house and Jett Title does the title search for me and they issue the title commitment to me, if there was any such lien, you've basically gone and found that prior to me taking possession of the property and it's been resolved, or else I won't take possession. Is that right?
Yes and no. So we're going to make sure that it's resolved before you sign on the dotted line. If it cannot be resolved, and most of the time it can be resolved, but if for some reason it can't be resolved, I mean, you're not buying the house.
Right.
Especially, the lender's not going to lend on a house that they can't have a free and clear title on. So, but we'll step in and we'll make sure that if you take possession of that house, that we've either cleared it or we've written over top of it, meaning that my title insurance underwriter is okay with the risk that is never going to pop up or affect ownership, meaning that they know that lien is there, but they're going to insure that property over top of that lien. So if it ever pops up, you don't have to worry about it.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Now, tell us that great story that you were going to tell us.
It's the Abraham Lincoln story. So I got to tell you, I got to give credit to one of my closers back in Kentucky. That his name is Bud, and he's a great closer. But he tells the Abraham Lincoln story, and so I've added to it a little bit. So this is a Kentucky story, but I'm going to tell you, Nate, how our industry and title insurance made the 16th president of the United States, and that is Abraham Lincoln.
A lot of people don't know that Lincoln's from Kentucky. Everybody thinks he's from Illinois, but he's actually a Kentucky boy, wasn't he?
Exactly right. So he was born and raised in Kentucky / Indiana, but that's not where he's the president from. He's the president from Illinois, the 16th president from Illinois. And this kind of talks about how he gets to Illinois from Kentucky, and so. But during this story, I'm gonna bring, 3 historically famous Kentucky people together, and that is Abraham Lincoln for one, Henry Clay, and some people know who Henry Clay is, most don't. Henry Clay was a very famous attorney back in the Lincoln days, and then Daniel Boone, and most of us know the coonskin hat wearing Daniel Boone, and but some of us don't know that his job was to survey the land, and so so that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with Kentucky. So Kentucky was just land owned by Virginians back in the day. It was their background play yard or whatever, backyard. And Kentucky decided it was going to become a state. How? I don't know. We can go search that some other time, but decides to become a state. And then here comes Daniel Boone. He's going to survey the land. Well, Kentucky is not flatlands. There's mountains and cliffs and trees, and the terrain is very difficult to get across. So Daniel Boone surveys the land. He's out of the picture now, right? He surveys the land. Well, what happened was Kentucky landowners, once they were buying their properties in Kentucky, they were sometimes having to buy their properties not just once to ensure they had title on property, but 2, 3, 4 times over to get a clear and free title. So in comes Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln is born, and he's born to Tom Lincoln, who owned a family farm in central Kentucky, kind of up by the Lexington area of Kentucky. And as sure as title insurance will protect you and your ownership, there was a defect on the title for Tom Lincoln's family farm, where Abraham Lincoln was born, and so it was a total loss. Tom Lincoln lost his family farm. You believe that? So that's the first hit on Abraham Lincoln. So they decide to move kind of southwest in Kentucky. I call it Heaven Hill. I don't know if that's really the area, but Heaven Hill, kind of south of Louisville, is where they're at, quite south of Louisville. And so Tom Lincoln establishes a family farm, and I'm going to take a quick pause here, or a quick timeout, because I need to let you know who Henry Clay is and how he comes into all this. So Henry Clay really got famous by defending and prosecuting against title claims in the state of Kentucky. And so there was some involvement from Henry Clay when Tom Lincoln lost his first family farm. Okay. So now the Lincolns are down kind of south center of Kentucky. And guess what happened to them for a second time?
No.
Yes. They lost their family farm, right? I'm not kidding. So they lost their family farm. About this time, Abraham Lincoln's really taking note of Henry Clay and all the efforts that he's done in law. And Tom Lincoln decides to heck with Kentucky, just like everybody else would at that point. You lose 2 family farms, you're out of here, right? So they moved to Indiana, not Illinois. That's not how he gets to Illinois. So they moved to Indiana. Spent a couple years there, whatever. And Abraham is kind of following Henry Clay, keeping an eye on his law career. And Tom Lincoln decides to move his family back to Kentucky. Guess what happens for a third time?
Come on.
I'm not joking. 3 times there was title issues with the Lincoln family farm. This third time didn't result in a total loss, though. It was a partial loss of equity or whatever. And Abraham Lincoln is quite grown at this time and is really following Henry Clay, who's got some involvement with it somehow or some way or another. And Abraham decides to move to Illinois. This is where he comes in. Move to Illinois. He's got Henry Clay as his mentor, and decides that he is going to become an attorney. He's going to study law. So self-taught himself law, all in my mind because of the title claims on the property, which gave him access to Henry Clay. Can you believe that?
That's a wild story, Matt.
Have you not heard that? Have you heard me tell that before?
I've heard it before, but I forgot how I forgot how screwed they got 3 times.
3 times. So title insurance claims, title defects on property, it's not new. It's been around for a very long time. Title defects, and so when you think of well, you know what? It's a new construction. Well, yeah, but who owned that property? Who owned the land that new construction it was on, 20, 30 years ago? That's the importance of making sure that you work with a good partner title company to do a good title search. And it's the reason that you protect yourself. Title insurance is insurance, and you only need it when you need it. But when you need it, you'll be happy that you have it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right. In closing, I ask all my guests this question, and you are no exception, my friend. So tell me what your favorite thing, if you had to pick just one thing, what is your favorite thing about living and working on the Space Coast?
Oh, it's definitely the people. It's the people. So I'm originally from North Dakota. I'm an Army veteran, disabled Army veteran, and Brevard County, the Space Coast, it seems like it's a mixed bag of people from all over the country. I run into more people here that are Army vets, been to North Dakota, hockey fans, you name it. And so my favorite part about Space Coast is the people, for sure.
Awesome. So if we have any real estate agents or other business partners or even home buyers that want to reach out and ask some questions and get to know a little bit more about Matt and Jett Title, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you 2 ways. The first of which is you can call me anytime. My office number is 321-455-5388, or my email is very easy to remember. It's matt@jetttitle.com. matt@jetttitle.com.
All right. Matt@jetttitle.com. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Matt, for coming on. I know that this was a great education for me, and I knew some of this stuff, but just hearing it again, it's a great education. And I think a lot of people are going to learn quite a bit if they watch this back. So thanks again for coming, and we really appreciate it.
Have a good one. Thanks, Nate.